Amazon didn't dominate commerce because it sold products. It dominated because it decided what a market was. For years, that decision made Amazon untouchable. Sellers believed outcomes were earned. Buyers believed results were neutral. That belief was the marketplace. Amazon didn't lose that position through competition. It didn't lose it through regulation. It lost it the moment it stopped acting as a referee and started optimizing as a participant. Nothing collapsed, nothing broke. The marketplace kept running. But from that moment on, trust stopped compounding. And once trust stops compounding, a market never recovers. Before that shift, Amazon occupied a position no company had ever held. It was not simply a retailer. It was not just a logistics company. It was not even a technology platform in the traditional sense. Amazon functioned as the decision layer of commerce. When people needed to buy something, they did not ask where to shop. They went to Amazon. That behavior was not habit. It was delegation. Amazon was where uncertainty ended. The search box replaced comparison. The results page replaced deliberation. The buy box replaced choice. People did not feel like they were choosing Amazon. They felt like they were executing a decision that had already been made. This is what infrastructure looks like. Markets usually work through friction. Price comparison, brand evaluation, trust building, risk assessment. Amazon removed most of that friction, not by making better products, by making outcomes feel neutral. Neutrality was Amazon's real product. Sellers believed the system rewarded performance. Better pricing won visibility. Better fulfillment won trust. Better reviews won conversion. Buyers believed results were sorted by relevance, by reliability, by probability of satisfaction. They did not believe Amazon was optimizing for itself. They believed Amazon was optimizing the market. That belief mattered more than speed, more than scale, more than logistics. Because belief is what makes a market feel fair. Fairness creates participation. Participation creates volume. Volume creates leverage. This is how Amazon's power compounded without appearing aggressive. Amazon did not need to convince sellers to join. Leaving meant forfeiting access to the largest pool of ready-to-buy customers ever assembled. Amazon did not need to persuade buyers to stay. Leaving meant reintroducing friction into a process that had already been solved. This asymmetry created dependence on both sides, but the dependence was not perceived as coercive. It felt earned. That distinction is everything. A coerced market resists. A trusted market complies willingly. Amazon's marketplace was trusted. Sellers optimized for it. They redesigned supply chains around it. They accepted thinner margins in exchange for volume. They built entire businesses that existed only inside its rules. They did this because the rules felt stable. They felt external. They felt impartial. Amazon did not appear to be competing with them. It appeared to be hosting them. Hosting is a position of power when it is believed. The buy box is the clearest example. Winning the buy box was treated as an outcome of merit. Price, availability, fulfillment, reliability. Sellers accepted losses when they lost it. They adjusted behavior instead of questioning legitimacy. That acceptance was leverage. Buyers behaved the same way. When a result appeared at the top, it was trusted by default. When a product was labeled Amazon's Choice, it felt like a recommendation, not an advertisement. When Prime shipping was attached, hesitation disappeared. This trust was not emotional, it was procedural. People trusted the process, not the company. Procedural trust scales better than brand loyalty. It does not require affection, it only requires consistency. Amazon delivered consistency. That consistency trained behavior. People stopped searching elsewhere. They stopped checking alternatives. They stopped asking if the result was optimal. They assumed the system had already done the work. This is how Amazon stopped being a store and became a market. Markets are not defined by inventory. They are defined by belief. Belief that prices are competitive. Belief that access is fair. Belief that outcomes are not predetermined. As long as that belief holds, the market grows. Amazon protected that belief for years. It did not flood the marketplace with its own products early. It did not visibly preference itself. It did not aggressively tilt the field. That restraint was strategic. It allowed Amazon to build the most valuable asset a marketplace can have: credibility. Credibility is what allows a market to absorb volume without backlash. It is what allows rules to be accepted without explanation. It is what allows optimization to happen quietly. Because when a market is believed to be neutral, optimization is interpreted as improvement. Every adjustment Amazon made was framed as efficiency. Faster shipping, better sorting, higher standards. Sellers adapted. Buyers benefited. The system expanded. This is why Amazon's growth compounded instead of resetting. Each new seller increased selection. Each new product increased utility. Each new buyer increased incentive for sellers to stay. The flywheel was real. But the flywheel only worked because neutrality was protected. Neutrality is fragile. It does not disappear when rules change. It disappears when incentives change. Amazon's marketplace was built on a simple assumption. The platform does not compete with its participants. As long as that assumption held, trust compounded automatically. The moment it weakened, everything downstream changed. This is why Amazon's dominance was not about logistics. Logistics were a moat, not the engine. The engine was legitimacy. Amazon was trusted to decide what the market showed, who appeared, who won, who disappeared. That authority did not come from power. It came from restraint. Restraint is what signals neutrality. Neutrality is what makes outcomes feel earned. Earned outcomes keep participants compliant. This is why Amazon could raise fees without revolt, why policy changes were tolerated, why sellers adapted instead of exiting. The marketplace did not feel adversarial, it felt procedural. That perception allowed Amazon to grow without resistance, until Amazon changed the incentives that sustained it. Not publicly, not loudly, internally. When Amazon began treating the marketplace not as an ecosystem to host, but as a surface to optimize for margin density, neutrality stopped being protected. At first, this was not visible. The site still worked. Orders still flowed. Revenue still grew. But markets do not collapse when trust erodes. They hollow. Sellers do not revolt immediately. They diversify quietly. Buyers do not leave immediately. They become skeptical. The flywheel slows not because volume disappears, but because belief stops. Compounding. That is what makes this story dangerous. Amazon did not lose the marketplace through incompetence. It did not lose it through competition. It lost it by changing what success meant internally. Once success is measured by extraction instead of facilitation, neutrality becomes inefficient. And once neutrality becomes inefficient, it is only a matter of time before the market adjusts. Amazon's real power was never scale, it was neutrality. And neutrality, once traded away, does not return. Amazon did not wake up one day and decide to betray its sellers. Nothing about the shift was framed internally as a violation of trust. It was framed as optimization. By the time the marketplace reached maturity, Amazon faced a constraint it had not dealt with before. Growth was no longer unlimited, selection was no longer scarce, logistics were no longer the differentiator. The marketplace had become infrastructure. Infrastructure creates a different problem. Once it exists, the question stops being how to grow it. The question becomes how to extract more value from what already flows through it. This is where the incentives changed. Amazon's early marketplace strategy was simple: maximize participation, reduce friction, protect neutrality. Neutrality was expensive. It limited how aggressively Amazon could monetize. It prevented Amazon from fully exploiting its data advantage. It required restraint in a system built to optimize relentlessly. For years, that restraint made sense. The marketplace was still expanding. Trust was still compounding. Scale was still the primary objective. But once scale plateaued, neutrality became inefficient. Amazon could see everything. It saw which products sold best, which price points converted, which listings failed, which features drove returns, which sellers struggled with fulfillment, which categories produced the highest margins. No other company in commerce had that visibility. The data did not suggest wrongdoing. It suggested opportunity. From an internal perspective, leaving that opportunity unused felt irrational. Amazon did not enter private labels because it wanted to eliminate sellers. It entered private labels because it already knew which products would succeed. This distinction matters. The move was not competitive in the traditional sense. It was extractive. Amazon was not guessing. It was executing against certainty. Private label expansion was framed as customer benefit. Lower prices, consistent quality, faster fulfillment, all true. But structurally, it introduced a conflict the marketplace had never contained. Amazon was no longer only hosting the market, it was competing inside it. That competition was asymmetrical. Amazon controlled discovery, Amazon controlled ranking, Amazon controlled fulfillment incentives, Amazon controlled enforcement. Sellers still believed outcomes were procedural, but procedures were now influenced by Amazon's own participation. At first, the changes were subtle. Private label products did not dominate search results. They appeared alongside sellers. They were priced competitively. They used prime fulfillment. Nothing felt aggressive. But incentives had shifted. When Amazon entered a category, it no longer needed to maximize seller success. It needed to maximize category profitability. That difference is structural. Seller data stopped being neutral information. It became strategic input. The buy box began to reward behaviors that aligned with Amazon's margin goals. Fulfillment by Amazon became less optional. Advertising spend became more influential. Sponsored listings increased in visibility. Organic discovery became harder to sustain. Again, none of this was framed as betrayal. It was framed as efficiency. From Amazon's internal view, this was rational. Why host a neutral marketplace if you can be the most efficient participant? Why allow sellers to capture margin when Amazon could capture it directly? Why preserve a referee role when playing produced higher returns? No one inside the system thought neutrality was being destroyed. They believed it was being modernized. This is the most dangerous phase of platform decay. The system still works, participants still profit, transactions still clear, but the incentives no longer align with trust preservation. Once Amazon became both referee and competitor, neutrality stopped being protected by default. It had to be actively enforced, and active enforcement is costly. It limits optimization, it slows decision-making, it constrains margin expansion. As pressure increased to improve profitability, enforcement weakened. The marketplace was no longer measured primarily by seller health. It was measured by contribution margin. This redefinition mattered more than any policy change. Success was no longer a healthy market. Success was a more efficient one. Efficiency in a market with asymmetric power produces extraction. Amazon did not break the rules. It rewrote what the rules optimized for. Buy box logic adjusted. Advertising inventory expanded. Search results became denser. Sponsored placements blended into organic listings. From the buyer's perspective, nothing appeared broken. Results still loaded quickly. Prices were still competitive. Shipping was still fast. From the seller's perspective, something had shifted. Winning no longer felt purely merit-based. Price was no longer enough. Performance was no longer enough. Visibility increasingly required payment. This was not stated. It was experienced. The marketplace stopped feeling like a competition and started feeling like a toll road. Sellers did not revolt. They adapted. They raised prices to offset fees. They invested in ads to protect visibility. They optimized listings for algorithms instead of customers. Adaptation is not resistance. It is acceptance under constraint. Amazon interpreted this adaptation as success. The system absorbed the change. Revenue increased. Engagement remained high. But trust does not disappear loudly. It thins. The moment sellers stop believing success is earned, behavior changes. They stop investing in quality differentiation. They stop building long-term brand equity inside the platform. They stop treating Amazon as a partner. They treat it as a channel. Channels are transactional. Markets are relational. Amazon redefined itself from market to channel without announcing it. This was the trade. Internally, the logic was consistent. Amazon already controlled demand. It already controlled logistics. It already controlled discovery. Leaving profit on the table to preserve neutrality felt inefficient, especially when sellers were captive. The assumption was simple. Sellers need Amazon more than Amazon needs sellers. That assumption was true initially, but markets are not static. Once participants perceive asymmetry as adversarial, they adjust behavior quietly. No one leaves immediately. They hedge. They diversify channels. They reduce dependence. They lower investment in platform-specific optimization. This is how authority erodes without churn. Amazon did not break the marketplace. It redefined it around itself. The marketplace still functioned. Orders still cleared. Revenue still grew. But the nature of participation changed. Sellers were no longer building inside Amazon. They were extracting from it while they could. That shift did not register in dashboards. It registered in posture. Trust stopped compounding. From that moment forward, the marketplace could grow in volume, but not in legitimacy. And legitimacy is the only thing that allows a market to dominate indefinitely. Amazon chose margin density over neutrality, optimization over restraint, extraction over facilitation. The decision was rational, it was internally consistent, it was irreversible. Because once a market operator competes with its participants, neutrality becomes performative, and performative neutrality never survives optimization pressure. Amazon did not lose buyers when trust eroded. That is what made the change hard to detect. Shoppers stayed, orders continued, revenue grew. From the outside, nothing appeared broken. But markets do not lose authority when participants leave. They lose authority when participants stop believing outcomes are fair. That shift happened quietly. Sellers noticed it first, but they did not announce it. They adjusted. When neutrality exists, sellers invest in differentiation. Better products, better branding, better listings. When neutrality disappears, sellers invest in survival. They optimize for visibility instead of value. They copy instead of innovate. They price for ads instead of margins. This was the behavioral pivot. Once sellers believed Amazon was no longer a neutral host, the incentive to build inside the marketplace weakened. Why invest in long-term quality when the platform could undercut you using your own data? Why differentiate when ranking could be bought? Why improve reviews when sponsored placement could override them? Sellers did not leave en masse. They reduced exposure. They diversified distribution. They shifted brand building off Amazon. They treated Amazon as inventory clearance rather than growth infrastructure. This mattered more than churn, because authority depends on dependence. Amazon still had sellers. It no longer had seller allegiance. This change reshaped the marketplace from the inside. Product selection increased, but meaningful differentiation declined. Listings multiplied, but clarity disappeared. The signal-to-noise ratio worsened. This is when buyers felt the change, not as outrage, but as friction. Search results became harder to parse. Multiple near-identical listings competed for attention. Reviews became less trustworthy. Not because Amazon allowed fraud intentionally, because adversarial incentives encourage manipulation. When sellers stopped trusting the system, they stopped playing clean. Fake reviews proliferated because reviews lost authority. Keyword stuffing increased because ranking lost transparency. Sponsored placements crowded results because visibility required payment. Amazon responded operationally. It improved detection. It enforced policies. It refined algorithms. But enforcement does not restore trust once incentives turn adversarial. Markets rely on alignment, not policing. The buyer experience did not collapse. It degraded. Results still appeared. Orders still shipped, but confidence weakened. Buyers stopped assuming the first result was the best result. They scrolled more. They compared more. They hesitated more. This hesitation is subtle, but decisive. When buyers hesitate, authority has already thinned. Amazon became a place to search, not a place to decide. This distinction matters. In a trusted market, discovery and decision collapse into one step. In an untrusted market, discovery expands into evaluation. Evaluation increases cognitive load. Cognitive load reduces loyalty. Buyers stayed because Amazon was convenient. They trusted less because outcomes felt optimized, not earned. Sponsored results accelerated this shift. Once ads blended indistinguishably into organic listings, discovery stopped feeling neutral. This was not deception, it was density. Sponsored content expanded because it monetized efficiently, but each additional sponsored slot diluted credibility. When every result could be influenced by payment, the meaning of ranking changed. Ranking stopped signaling quality, it signaled strategy. Buyers adapted accordingly. They read reviews skeptically. They checked external sites. They compared across platforms. None of this shows up as abandonment. It shows up as dilution of authority. Authority is not binary. It erodes through redundancy. Amazon listings began to feel interchangeable, not worse, just flatter. This flattening changed seller behavior further. If buyers cannot distinguish quality easily, price becomes the dominant lever. Price pressure increases. Margins compress. Compressed margins reduce incentive to invest in quality control. Quality inconsistency increases. Amazon compensated with faster fulfillment, better logistics, better returns. But logistics cannot substitute for trust in selection. Speed cannot fix uncertainty. This is the second-order effect Amazon underestimated. Neutral markets concentrate trust upstream. Adversarial markets push evaluation downstream. When buyers must evaluate, markets lose leverage. Amazon still processed transactions, it no longer settled decisions. That role shifted outward. Buyers checked Reddit, they watched YouTube reviews, they consulted third-party comparisons. Amazon became execution, not judgment. Execution is valuable, judgment is dominant. This is how authority disappears without customers leaving. The system adapts. Sellers treat Amazon as a channel. Buyers treat Amazon as a tool. Neither treats it as an arbiter. Engagement. Metrics remain strong. Order volume persists. But the marketplace stops compounding power. Compounding requires belief. Once belief erodes, scale stabilizes but does not deepen. Amazon still won on convenience. It lost on legitimacy. This loss did not trigger revolt because convenience is sticky. Sticky systems can survive indefinitely without authority, but they cannot dominate ecosystems. This is why Amazon's marketplace stopped shaping commerce and started reflecting it. It followed demand instead of defining it. The most telling change was seller optionality. Before, sellers feared losing Amazon access. After, they feared overexposure to Amazon. That inversion is terminal for leverage. Markets dominate when participants fear exclusion. Channels persist when participants manage exposure. Amazon moved from the first category to the second, not through error, through optimization. The marketplace adjusted around the new incentives, selection widened, trust thinned. The system remained profitable. The authority vanished. This is why nothing went wrong visibly. There was no collapse, no mass exit, no scandal that killed the marketplace. There was adaptation. And adaptation always favors resilience over dominance. Amazon's marketplace survived by becoming transactional, but transactional systems cannot command belief. They can only process volume. The moment sellers stopped believing fairness was structural, the marketplace stopped being a market. It became a platform with inventory. That distinction is subtle, but it is irreversible, because once participants assume outcomes are extracted rather than earned, neutrality cannot be reasserted by policy. It requires incentive reversal, and incentive reversal would require Amazon to stop competing with its sellers. That was never going to happen. Markets do not collapse when they fail. They collapse when they lose legitimacy. Amazon did not lose the marketplace through competition, regulation, or logistics pressure. It lost it the moment neutrality stopped being the organizing principle. Neutrality is not a feature, it is the condition that makes markets work. A marketplace exists only when participants believe outcomes are earned through merit rather than extracted through position. The moment that belief breaks, the market does not disappear. It transforms. Amazon's marketplace transformed into infrastructure. Infrastructure processes volume. It does not arbitrate fairness. Once Amazon became both referee and competitor, authority fractured permanently. This was not because sellers felt wronged emotionally. It was because incentives turned adversarial. A marketplace can survive inefficiency. It cannot survive misalignment. When the host competes with participants, every rule change is suspect. Every ranking adjustment feels strategic. Every outcome feels provisional. Trust does not survive that environment, and trust cannot be selectively restored. Amazon could improve enforcement. It could adjust policies. It could refine detection. None of that mattered, because the problem was not abuse, it was architecture. A marketplace that self-preferences cannot credibly arbitrate outcomes. The incentives are incompatible. Once sellers internalize that reality, belief does not return. They may stay, they may transact, but they no longer organize their strategy around the platform. That is the line between dominance and persistence. Amazon crossed it. After that point, the system stabilized. Transactions continued, revenue grew, logistics improved. From the outside, Amazon looked stronger than ever, but authority was gone. Amazon could no longer shape seller behavior through trust. It could only shape it through enforcement and economics. That is a weaker form of control. Control without legitimacy requires constant pressure. Pressure creates friction. Friction reduces compounding power. This is why Amazon's marketplace stopped deepening its advantage. It scaled horizontally instead of vertically. More listings, more sellers, more ads, but less meaning per outcome. The marketplace became efficient at processing choice, not resolving it. This is why buyers stayed but stopped deferring. Convenience kept them, confidence did not. That distinction defines the end of a market. A true market settles questions. A platform executes transactions. Amazon became the second. This outcome could not be undone. Restoring neutrality would require Amazon to stop competing with sellers. It would require surrendering data advantages. It would require relinquishing margin density. That would mean reversing the very optimizations that stabilize the system. Markets cannot be neutral and extractive at the same time. Amazon chose extractive stability over neutral authority. That choice protected revenue. It ended dominance. The marketplace did not die. It finished evolving. It became resilient instead of commanding, durable instead of decisive. This is the cost Amazon cannot undo. Authority compounds only when participants believe the system is not playing against them. Once that belief is gone, scale no longer deepens power. It only sustains throughput. Amazon did not lose the marketplace. The marketplace stopped believing Amazon.